child, lost in the fog, and I'm frightened of meeting all you known unknown.
Hello and welcome to Poly Risk Reward. My name is Ned Stranger, and in 2024, my wife and I received the results of a DNA paternity test that showed that I'm not our daughter's biological father. Through these podcasts, I tell the story of our open marriage and this unexpected twist in forensic detail, with each episode focusing on a common question I get about open marriage, polyamory, and this unusual situation. One of the reasons I really love going on first dates is that you never really know exactly what you're getting into, and the idea of adventure and surprise is a big part of why dating can be fun, but also can be very stressful. And today, I'm going to share a story that sparked one of the only two rules that we have in our marriage around dating, and how it related to a bit of a fail on my part. Firstly, though, the rule itself. When I go to a person's place for the first time, whether it's a first date or a one-night stand or the beginning of a long, lifelong relationship, I have to share her name, address, and phone number with Anya, and vice versa. Now, this is obviously about protecting personal safety, and it gives Anya a feeling of security knowing where I am, but also knowing that if she really has to get hold of me in an emergency, if she can't get hold of me personally on my phone, she can try calling the date and get hold of me that way. So it's just a way of feeling like, you know, we know where each other is, and it's this kind of transparency about where we are. And I've never found anyone on a date have a problem with this either. So if a woman is already comfortable inviting me back to hers, she's also comfortable with me sharing where I'm going. And if anything, it kind of makes everyone feel more secure because, you know, we clearly think about these things and, you know, personal safety. When we first moved to Vienna, I'd never used dating apps before. And all I'd heard was this big social commentary about how bad they were and about how depressing it was and how bad the user experience was. So I was really excited to try it out for myself. And I created profiles on a couple of apps. I avoided Tinder because I'd heard how bad it was. But I think I made profiles on Bumble and Field. And fairly soon I had a match on Field with this woman who seemed really cool. She did aerial silk dancing and lots of sports and generally seemed really nice. So she started the conversation in German because she was Austrian. And because I studied at school when I was a teenager, I had this desire to practice my German and get it good again so that I didn't have to be that English guy that made everyone talk in English all the time, which is exactly what I'm doing now, 3.5 years later. So I replied in German and used Google Translate to make sure that what I was saying wasn't completely wrong, but basically tried to be polite and fit in with, you know, what she was doing. So we set a date to meet the following week, and I picked a wine bar that somebody recommended me, but then she was saying that she was arriving to the local metro station, so we could also just meet in the street and then walk to the bar together and have a little bit of a walk first. And I'm guessing this was her way of checking that I wasn't a complete lunatic, so she had every opportunity to physically run away. So we met in the street on Josefstädter Straße, which is in Vienna's 8th district. Now, I'd assumed that even though we'd been texting in German, because we were in Vienna, she would also speak English, because apparently everybody in Vienna speaks English. Well, when we met in the street, it became immediately clear that she did not speak a word of English. Before I describe what happened next, just a quick reminder that if you're enjoying these podcasts, please tell your friends about them because I want to share the word with more people. And I also have some very exciting podcast developments coming up soon involving other people. So stay tuned for that. And don't forget to also leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Anyway, back to the story. So, standing in the middle of the street, realizing that she spoke zero English, I kind of felt like I'd woken up in one of those nightmare dreams where you're in a German oral exam except everyone is staring at you and it turns out you're naked, and then you look up and you're in the middle of a modern European city, that kind of thing. But we were walking around the district and then ended up in the wine bar, and not only did she not speak English, but it turns out I didn't realize Austrian German is different to the German German that I learned at school. And so even the words I might have understood, I couldn't really understand because she had this weird accent and weird dialect. My strategy for dealing with all of this was to just ask very open questions and then listen intently. So I would ask, tell me your life story, erzählt mir deine Lebensgeschichte. And then she would talk for about 7 minutes while I stared at her and nodded at moments that I thought were appropriate. And she must have thought, oh, this guy's such a good listener. So nice, asking me a lot of questions, not just talking about himself. Although she probably also worked out at this point that my German was awful. But we had this conversation and I was maybe understanding 20% of what she said. And it was quite an excruciating hour and a half. My brain was hurting from all the listening and trying to translate in my head. It was a little bit like a German oral exam at school, but not the good kind. My eyes were stinging from all the staring, and I just felt really bad. This was my first dating app date, and it was a total fail. And then the bar closed the outside area, and they asked us, do you want to pay and leave, or do you want to move inside for another drink? And she said, yeah, let's go inside for another drink. And I thought, really? You're not going to take this opportunity to escape from this crazy, annoying Englishman with no German? At this point, I decided that honesty was probably the best approach. So we sat down inside and in my best German, I said, look, I'm really sorry. You're quite obviously very beautiful and intelligent and interesting and super nice. And it must be extremely boring for you to talk to me because I speak like a 6-year-old. And I just wanted to say I'm having a really nice time and I'm sorry if this is super boring for you. And she responded really nicely to these compliments and this openness. And I could even tell in her body language she was quite touched by the compliment. And then it occurred to me, why am I even bothering with words and stuff? Why don't I just rely solely on eye contact and body language as a way of communicating with her? And from this point on, the date was going a lot better. And I appreciate the wine had a bit of a say in this as well. It was really nice wine, to be fair. But after a couple more glasses, I asked her what she wanted to do. And she said, well, I was planning on going home, but I could come back to yours. And I said, well, I would invite you back to mine, but my wife is sleeping there, so that would just be a bit weird for everyone. But I could always come back home with you. And she said, yeah, all right. So we paid up and left and then went to the station. And now this is where some of the details in her life story, her Lebensgeschichte, had completely gone over my head. And it turned out that she didn't actually live in Vienna. She'd come specially to Vienna for this date with me. And she actually lived 50 kilometers outside of Vienna. So we did not go to the metro station. We went to the metro station, to another train station, and then got on a train. And it was quite weird because it was still COVID, so we'd kissed by this point, and then we had to put on our masks and get on the train for nearly an hour. It was very strange. And it was at this point that I texted Anya to say, oh, I'm going back to this woman's place. And because I was quite drunk at this point, my communication was very unclear and not particularly sensitive. So I said, it's okay though. She doesn't really speak any English and she lives outside of Vienna, but she's really cool. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, I'll keep you posted tomorrow when I'm on my way home. And this was the first time either of us had used apps. So Anya understandably freaked out at this. What the hell are you doing? Where are you going? You're leaving the city? I was getting a stream of angry messages from her. And then with the woman, we went to her place. And when we arrived, I sent Anya a location pin. What made it even worse was Anya looked it up on Google Earth. And I think at the point that picture was taken, the house was still under construction because on Google Earth, it just looked like a building site. So Anya was even more freaking out and worrying about what I'd kind of got myself into, whether I'd been abducted by somebody. And then when we reached the front door, it also occurred to me, well, if I missed this detail from her life story, what other details had I missed? Was she even single? Was she married? Did she live in a sex cult? Were there other people in the house? And so when we walked through the door, I was counting the doorways to try to understand how many people lived in the house, whether it seemed somewhere where only one person lived on her own. And she had a cat that was really sweet, but otherwise I didn't see any other signs of life. And as it turned out, despite the stream of messages I was still getting from Anya through the night, the date itself ended up really nice. We woke up in the morning, she made me some breakfast and then drove me to the train station so that I could get back to Vienna. But when I got back home to Anya was still, understandably, extremely angry at me for my terrible communication. And this is where, in one of those situations, you know when you've done something wrong and you just have no answer to it. Like, you want to be defensive, but you are just wrong and there is no argument. So we had a long conversation about communication and, you know, making each other feel safe with this whole dating thing. And this is the moment we decided to have the rule that when we go to someone's place for the first time, we're transparent in advance about their name and address and phone number. And throwing back to last week's episode and the Ned test of whether a rule is a good rule, it was clear, it had a good justification, i.e. making both of us feel safe in the dating situation, and it was pretty easy to comply with. There was no reason why the other person would mind this. All you had to do was remember to text the name, address, and phone number. So that was the story that sparked the first of our only 2 rules. And next week, I'm going to describe the second of those 2 rules. And also, very excitingly, one of the things I've realized from feedback from people is that these podcasts are just me, my voice, and my songs. And I'd quite like to make it not just about me and bring other people in and make the conversation a bit wider. So very soon, I'm going to be introducing some interview/conversational based episodes. So stay tuned for that. For now, please remember to share with your friends. Feel free to drop me a message if you have any questions you want talked about on an episode. And remember to leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. My name's Ned Stranger. This has been Poly, Risk, Reward.
You're just growing old, waiting for the fight to unfold. And now underneath the buildings bear their many teeth, and steel and glass and false belief rising up and leaving you behind.